Okay, so now we begin with lesson one. The first of the self-defense program is the wrist grab. Now, wrist grab is really common in martial arts books and magazines. They always show lots of different ways to get out of wrist grabs. Wing Chun generally tends to handle this in a very, very simple way. We have a couple different options for being grabbed at the wrist. The most simple and the most common in Wing Chun is if someone grabs your wrist, it doesn't matter if they grab what we call parallel or if they grab diagonally, it's all the same. I usually prefer to practice diagonal grabs, meaning left to left or right to right in class, because diagonal grabs tend to be stronger and more difficult. And if whatever I teach you, if it works diagonally, it often works parallel just as easily or even more easier. So we usually practice diagonally, but that doesn't mean that it only works diagonally. So the first one, someone grabs your wrist. Now we're assuming they're not coming at you with a punch, they're not pulling you or anything, someone is just holding on to you. If this is a serious situation where you feel that this is going to escalate very quickly, then we're going to punch and create distance. So normally in Wing Chun, when we punch, we would hit somebody in the throat, hit someone in the nose, or in the side of the jaw. Once we hit somebody, they let go. Traditionally in Wing Chun, after that, you would follow up and do chain punches, all right? That would be what I would say more in a fighting scenario, but a self-defense scenario, if someone just comes up to you and grabs you and you want to solve it, you don't want it to escalate. If you're going to use a punch, the moment you use the punch, after he lets go, I immediately create distance and create what we call a fence. This is a fence, which is nothing more than a thinly disguised Mansao Wusao or traditional Baizhong guard. We'll talk about the traditional guard a little bit later and the self-defense variation, but for now I want you to keep your hands up with the strong hand in the back. So the first exercise, your partner grabs. For training, we hit the chest. For real fighting, throat or nose. Chest is for training, practice using controlled force, landing with the bottom three knuckles. As soon as you hit, your partner lets go and you create space. So this is the first exercise. Go ahead and grab your partner and practice that one. If someone grabs you and you go for the punch, now of course, this is for training. For real fighting, we're gonna go to more vulnerable targets. But if you hit somebody and they're still holding on to you, right, which can happen, you hit somebody and they just tense up, we're going to use a secondary movement called Tutsao. Tutsao is in the 8th set of the form. We'll go over it in more detail in the 8th class in the prep course. So after I punch, he's still holding on. I'm going to use the Tutsao and create a fence and create distance immediately. So important that we don't do the Tutsao first, all right? You always attempt the punch because if you hit them and let go, all your problems are solved. It's very direct, very simple, not complicated at all. If you punch, they're still holding on to you. We're gonna load the hand here mid-forearm, and for training, you're gonna use the edge of your forearm here to attack your partner's wrist. In real fighting, I would attack the hand, but this isn't fun for practice, so we go a little bit closer to the wrist in training, to the hand in real fighting. As soon as you hit with this one, you strip the bottom hand out, this way here, and then you create a fence very clean. The movement looks like this. And this is the Tutsao movement from the 8th set of the form. We will continue that later, like I said, in class 8. So the exercise is your partner grabs, parallel, diagonal, doesn't matter. You initially punch, they're still holding on to you, set up the Tutsao, break free, step away, create a fence. Now go ahead and practice that with your partner. Okay, so the next variation is not as important for self-defense. If there's anything you remember for self-defense when someone grabs your wrist, is that you just go ahead and punch. If for some reason you can't punch, let's say you can't reach or there's some reason why you can't hit, you can always use your legs. You kick to the knee, kick to the instep this way here, or knee strike. You have a lot of very simple options. But it's important not to become fixated on the one part where your partner has you under control. A lot of times when people learn martial arts, someone will grab their wrist and they're always like trying to find all these complicated ways of getting out of the wrist grab and doing all like a 10-step process. But of course, the big problem with a lot of these things is not that they don't get you out of the wrist grab, but it's while you're applying some kind of 10-step process to get out, what is your opponent doing with his or her other hand? They're gonna punch you, they're gonna kick you. So your reaction always needs to be really quick. So that is the simple defense of the punch. And punch, the person's holding on, you have the Tutsao. the one I'm going to teach you now is not as important for self-defense. The real reason we teach this in the self-defense program is because it's a precursor for Chi Sao training. We're actually going to use the cross Taan, which you're going to learn later in today's lesson, is in the first set of the Siu Nim Tau form, and we're going to do it with a simple 45-degree turn. What's important is that you don't keep your weight in the center. You shift your weight to one side here, and your fingers are going to point towards your partner. So when your partner grabs you, the first exercise we're going to do is turn with the Tan Sao like this. All right? So important, when your partner holds on to you, at first don't use a lot of resistance. You can build it up a little bit later. You want to keep the elbow in and turn your body behind it. Common mistake is people leave the elbow here and they try to lift up like this and they end up using force on force. So think about keeping this hand in the same time and space. If he puts his other hand on top of his hand like this is just to mark it, right? This is just a training exercise. When I do the Tan Sao, his hand will still be under that point. So in other words, I'm not physically moving the arm somewhere else. If anything, I'm moving myself around the movement here. This is the cross Taan. So we can start with this exercise. You can grab your partner, do a few repetitions of that. After that, you're going to add the punch to the turn. So it's Tan Sao and punch with turn, like this. This is better, obviously, diagonally, but also works parallel. We're going to turn like this. Now, if you turn with the Tan Sao punch and hit, and your partner is still holding on to you, we're going to add Pak Sao punch and step in this way to break the grip. So very slow, Tan Sao punch. All right, I use a turn. Now my punching hand becomes a slapping hand, and I'm going to step in. Pak Sao punch this way here. I step in to close the gap. So very medium pace, Tan Sao punch, Pak Sao punch. All right, this is the next one. Again, for practical self-defense, I would use the first two I taught you. This is a little bit more of a precursor to more advanced things you'll be learning later in Chi Sao. Go ahead and practice with your partner now. Okay, so the final variation of the wrist grab defense, and I know it seems like a lot of defenses against a wrist grab, it's actually not. If you think about it, the main wrist grab defense is that you punch with your free hand or kick with a free leg. The other variations we're showing you are like for specific and special situations. For a lot of the self-defense programs, we have what I call a drunk uncle response. Meaning that most of the Wing Chun responses, if someone grabs you or whatever, are very direct and sometimes perhaps a little bit aggressive, because if our opponent is big and strong and we're trying to be nice to them, it's not really going to work well for us. So most of the responses in Wing Chun are very direct and to the point, and we hit somebody so that they let go. But sometimes you're in a situation where someone grabs you that it's not the most appropriate to hit them back, okay? This could be someone you know who might just be a little bit drunk, or for example, when we teach kids, this is the only version of the wrist grab defense that we teach for kids, because this one is acceptable in self-defense or a bullying scenario. The so-called drunk uncle response for the wrist grab has a very similar Tan Sao movement to the previous one, but instead of punching, we're going to use a Pak Sao on the elbow to break free from the grip. And to make the movement even more powerful, we're going to use a side step so that we have our waist and our body weight moving this one out of the way. So we call this affectionately the drunk uncle response for the wrist grab. All right, so again, it works both parallel and diagonal. If you do it parallel arm, the Pak Sao is going to go more downward. If you do it diagonally, the Pak Sao is going to go more horizontally. That's the only variation. So your partner is going to grab you. You're going to take a side step away from the direction you're doing the Pak Sao in, and immediately go up in a fence and tell your partner to relax and keep it easy, all right? Your partner grabs you. The first step, Tan Sao with the side step. At the same time I do the side step, my hand is going to Pak Sao the elbow. And I throw both the Tan Sao and the Pak Sao forward. So in other words, it's not just the Pak Sao breaking the grip. I send both hands forward like this. So it's one and immediately hands up in a fence like that. And that's the drunk uncle response for the wrist grab. Go ahead and practice that with your partner, and that's the end of the self-defense portion. We're going to move on to the warm-up after this. Okay, so now it's time for the warm-up. So I want you to start in a right advancing stance and have your hands forward in the Baizhong position. And again, the Baizhong goes this way, hand on your chest. You put the other hand here, the other hand here, point your front fingers to the nose, and then this hand up, and you're ready to go. Starting with the right hand, the first punch is the short inch punch. We're gonna do 1 punch per count. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Very good. Make sure you keep your shoulders back. 2 punches per count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Everyone check your stance. Make sure your weight is on the back leg. You can easily lift your legs up and down. Okay, 3 punches per count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Good job. As always, make sure you're landing with the bottom 3 knuckles, aiming with the ring finger knuckles. So you want a nice pulled up fist. Now we're gonna do 50 punches nonstop. Just count the punches on one hand up to 25, and then you know you've done 50, and go. Nice and relaxed. Weight is on the back leg. Keep the knees bent, head back, posture straight. Think about your supporting leg. Okay, once you've finished, you're going to sink back into the on guard position, our baizhong position. Now we're going to switch sides. The front leg moves to the side, and then the rear leg replaces in the front. So you can move over a little bit here. And now you have the left lead. We're gonna start punching with the left hand, same as what we did before. 1 punch per count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. 2 punches per count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. 3 punches per count now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Good. And now 50 punches nonstop. Nice and relaxed. Don't use too much force. Keep it nice and smooth. Go. Good. Shoulders stay back, knees stay down, head back. Nice and relaxed. Don't worry about power. Just get the technique down. After you finish that last arm, your arm should be locked. That last punch, sorry. And now sink. And now we're going to switch again. So we switch legs, and now we have the other leg forward. Second exercise is the front thrust kick. While we practice the front thrust kick, very important, your upper body isn't going to move. Normally in Wing Chun, we always have a hand technique when we kick, but for the warm-up, it's all about trying to be a statue with your upper body. Get that so-called no shadow kick. 1 kick per count, kicking with the heel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And now we're gonna switch. Boom, and then move back over here. Same thing. 1, 2, make sure you pick the knee up first before you kick. 3, as always, kicking with the heel. 4, 5, 6, upper body doesn't move at all. 7, 8, 9, and 10. And now we switch. Okay, so now we go to the third exercise in the warm-up, which is the side kick. We have the more difficult foot pivot, and of course we have to coordinate the bong sao as well. The side kick goes to the knee, and then you reset in between each count. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And we go ahead and switch. Good. And then we'll just reposition back here to the center. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And there we go. And now we go on to the next exercise. So go ahead and switch. The next exercise are the knee strikes. We're going to start with a nice solid clinch. As much as possible, try to keep the elbows touching in the whole time. So this is not only going to teach you how to hold somebody's neck very tightly when you're giving them a knee strike, but this also has the added benefit of teaching you the elbow in structure, which is very important in Wing Chun. The knee strike is going to be done with the rear leg, so it's a nice power knee, and point the toe. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And go ahead and switch. Keep the clinch in. Other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so now we go to the elbow strikes. Make sure you fully turn and shift all of your weight, turning one foot at a time, using the forearm to hit with the elbow and moving out of the center. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And go ahead and switch. And as you see, after every elbow strike, Barry sends the hand right back to the center. This is very important Wing Chun concept, regaining the center line and leading with the hand. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Very good. Now we go to the last warm-up exercise, which is the get-up. So we're going to start on the ground. All right, so we go in a sit fall. You're going to set up in the position here, starting with the right leg. Make sure you send your hand forward as you throw out the kick. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and up on 10. And there you go, coming up in a fence. Now back on the other side. You can practice the sit fall on the way down if you've learned it. If you haven't learned it, it comes later, I think lesson 7. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and up on 10. And there you go. That's the warm-up. So now we begin with the Siu Nim Tau form. We're going to start today in lesson 1 with the first set. But before we do the first set, we have to set the stance. When we set the stance, first thing we do is we start with the feet together. I like to keep the feet about 1 finger distance apart, so they're basically touching, but just a little bit of space. And before I do the form, as with any solo training, I like to just take a breath, let everything out. Anything that's bothering you in your day, that just goes out the door. You just relax and breathe. And you're going to bring your hands up in a straight line right next to your chest here, trying to imagine almost like you're pinching something with your elbows so they're not flared out like this. Posture straight, and the front of your fists are basically level with the chest. Now the first part of setting the stance is you're going to bend the knees, but bend your knees like you're sinking your weight. You almost want to feel like your lower half becomes really heavy. Upper body in Wing Chun is very relaxed. The lower half is not stiff, it's stable. After you set the weight down, you're going to use the knees to open up the stance, and the feet are going to follow. So you have about a 45-degree angle on each foot to the outside. Now using the toes as pivots, you're going to pivot out until your feet create a 60-degree equilateral triangle. Now, the details of the stance work we'll get into in the footwork progression portion, but I want you to imagine that not like you're excessively clamping your knees. This is kind of a dated way of looking at it. I want you to just think of gently creating a little bit of pressure inside as if you're holding like a beach ball, not something heavy, a very small beach ball, so that you have a little bit of very light tension there. Your hips are slightly forward. But as a result of your hips being forward, you don't want your upper body to lean back. You want to keep your body straight. So your lower half should feel like the roots of a tree. They're underground and they're very firm. But the upper half of your body, this is the part that's out of the ground, and this can sway in the wind a little bit. So the upper body shouldn't be tense. So this is how we set the stance. So now let's set the stance one more time. So the hands come straight up. You bend your knees, open the knees, close the knees. Stance is an equilateral triangle, hips are forward, holding very light tension in the lower half, posture straight. So set 1 begins with the cross Taan. We're going to bring both hands forward. This way here, the left is on top from your point of view. The hands are nice and relaxed, and they're basically creating an X in front of your chest. Elbow is 1 fist distance away from the body. Now, keeping the elbows essentially in the same position, you're going to drop straight down and perform the gansao. The gansao should be flat, not like this. All right. There's some instructors that teach it this way, but this is not the Hong Kong style. We want to have the hands flat like this. Elbows are slightly bent and slightly pressing downward. Now you pause here for a moment, do an internal rotation, and come right back to the original position. Hold it there for a brief moment, and then pull straight back. So we'll do that one more time. Cross Taan, cross Gan, internal rotation, and pull straight back. So go ahead and practice this for at least 20 reps. If you have any questions or you're not sure about something, go ahead and watch the video again. And this is set 1 of the Siu Nim Tau form. Okay, so now we come to the footwork progression. The first piece of footwork in the footwork progression is what we call the crab step. So actually the crab step's not technically the first part of the footwork progression. The first part of the footwork progression is the setting of the stance, which we already covered in the form portion. Now once you've set the frontal stance here, you want to imagine that you have a spring or perhaps a link holding your knees together. So if someone were to try to pull the knees apart, they would naturally kind of pull back together like this. This is one of the ways that Wing Chun fighters maintain their stability, although we have an upright stance. Unlike many of the traditional forms of Kung Fu, we don't use a low stance for stability, we use a high stance. So in order to keep us from kind of flying away very easily, we have to link the two knees together and imagine that they're kind of pulling together as if they're linked by a spring. So the crab step is the epitome of that spring between the knees. I take a very small step to the side, which would increase the tension on the spring between the knees, and the second foot automatically pulls in. So I step, and this one goes here. It's a very short step. Try to avoid doing it in 2 steps. It's not one and then step. You're not kind of inching like a slinky down a set of stairs. It's one action. You move as a unit to the side and then back. 1, 2, and 3. Try to keep the angle of the stance this way here the whole time. So don't let the feet start to flutter out like this. Keep it like this. So it's 1, 2, 3, and then the other side. 1, 2, 3. So now for the footwork progression, you're going to practice it just like that. You're going to start 3 times to the right, then 3 times to the left, and I suggested you practice this as many times as you need to start to feel comfortable. This is going to be very important because we're going to keep adding to the footwork progression in every class. So you would do this step for day 1. For day 2, when we add the next part, you would add this almost like you're learning another form. You do step 1 and then step 2, so you're going to continually add more to the plate in terms of the footwork progression, and each one builds on the next one. So don't skimp on the crab step, although it seems kind of basic. Okay, so now we come to our first practical portion. So for lesson 1, we start with the most basic defense we have in Wing Chun, which we call the wedge. Now the wedge is not something that is often referred to in Hong Kong Wing Chun schools. The wedge is essentially just the consequence of sending your hands forward. A Wing Chun punch goes forward and creates a triangular structure. So when we send our hands forward and use our punch to wedge off incoming punches, that effect we simply call the wedge. But the wedge in and of itself is not like a technique that one would speak of regularly in Hong Kong Wing Chun circles. It's more of a natural byproduct of doing the Wing Chun punches. So when we start with the wedge, I want you to start in the Bai Zhong position, very similar to what we did in the warm-up. So we come over here, you're gonna start this way. Start in the Bai Zhong. Again, the Bai Zhong can be measured this way here. The only difference is I want you to put your strong hand in front. So if you're right-handed, you put the right hand in front. And whenever we switch leads, you always switch crossing wrist over wrist. Now, to keep the exercise really simple, you're going to take your open-handed Bai Zhong or ready position and close the fists, just to make it really simple. The wedge is one of the most basic techniques we have in Wing Chun. You're going to send both of your hands forward along a somewhat slanted line towards the nose of your opponent. If you see, the backhand is pretty close to the front one, a little bit closer than when we normally are for chain punches. Chain punches, our backhand is normally somewhere where our elbow is. For the initial wedge, it's going to be a little bit further up, but it's not together. So we're not sending two hands together. That's a very common mistake when students do the wedge, or sometimes they will like almost glue one hand behind the other one. We're not doing that. The hands from a bird's eye view are still not touching each other. They're still on the center. It's just that we close this one off a little bit and then you come back. So the first exercise we're going to do is from a closed fisted on guard position. You're going to send the wedge forward like this, both hands together. Send it forward and keep it locked when you're finished, and then reset. Send it forward, hold it for a brief moment, and then come back. If you're right-handed, I really want you doing it with the right hand in front. If you're left-handed, do it with the left hand in front, and go ahead and get some reps. It's okay to practice on both sides, but for practical fighting, I want you to be much better on your dominant hand. I'd rather you be strong on your dominant hand than weak at both sides. All right, so now we're going to do this from the side view. So we go this way here, hand goes forward. Both of them are going together, slight upward angle and back. Hand goes forward and back, and hand goes forward. Now from the other side, so you can see the inside hand. Hand goes forward and back, hand goes forward and back. Okay, so now we're going to face front again. That's the solo version of the exercise, so you can go ahead, pause the video here, practice those on your own and get the coordination. Once you feel comfortable with that, we're going to do it from the advancing stance. So now, right leg forward. So from here, same thing. We can do it stationary, sending the hands forward. This is just to get you acclimated to doing it from the advancing stance. Once this one feels comfortable, again, you can pause the video, go ahead and practice it from the advancing stance. We're now going to add a step, because the real wedge is activated when we go forward and we use the pressure of our step going forward to wedge off the incoming punch. So you're going to step and wedge in. Go ahead. Boom. Hold it there for a moment and then reset. So very important when you practice, you can go ahead and step back and reset, is that we don't want to do a punch and then move back, because if you pull your hand back, you're giving your opponent a chance to hit you. So send the wedge forward, stay there for a moment as if you're pegging your opponent with that. You don't want to flick it back too quickly. So you step forward and then back. All right, and reset. All right, so now let's look at that from the side, facing this way here. So you're going to step forward with the wedge and then reset. Step back. Step forward with the wedge and reset. Good. Okay, so now let's face forward again. Go ahead and pause the video. Practice the advancing step with the wedge together. When you feel comfortable with that, we'll go on to the next exercise, which is to add the chain punches. Now from here, you're going to wedge in step, and then you're going to follow up with 3 to 5 chain punches. So you step in, wedge, boom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, and now back, reset. Keep the strong hand in front. So you go forward, send the wedge, go, boom, and then 5 chain punches. Very good, and then reset. Very important when you start out, you keep your elbow bent. A lot of Wing Chun students make a mistake and they start to straighten their front arm. If your front arm is straight, you're not going to be able to develop any elbow power. So always make sure that you reset here so you can send it forward and punch. So step forward, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And these are the solo exercises. Now we're going to move on to the partner exercises. Okay, so now we come to the partner training portion of the practical stuff. We just did all the solo drills for the wedge. Now we're going to do it with a partner. I'm going to introduce a training protocol that we're going to use a lot in the prep course. And we even use it beyond in the technician training program, because it's very important to understand, yes, we're learning practical skills. Yes, we want to make sure we can do it against a real punch if someone is trying to, take a swing at us or whatever, but that's not how we learn it. We learn everything step by step. So I have a training protocol I call the human wooden dummy, meaning that your partner is just basically going to stand there as if they're a human wooden dummy. Now, this isn't the most realistic type of situation you would end up in, but this is just a training protocol for introducing new movements. Because when you practice it this way, there's no stress. You're not worried about someone coming at you with a punch, and you also have to perform the technique you just learned 30 seconds ago. You can just focus on the technique without the stress of somebody coming in and trying to crack you one. As you feel comfortable doing the technique in the human wooden dummy setup, then of course you can start to do it against a live punch, and then from there we can build up the resistance progressively and then add things to make it more realistic. So we're gonna start using what we call the human wooden dummy for the wedge. Now you're gonna start with the right leg forward as the Wing Chun defender. All of the stuff from the prep course, we're gonna start from the advancing stance. For those who have done Wing Chun before or come from a traditional Wing Chun background, you're going to notice that I don't focus too much on using the arrow step in the practical fighting portion, because this program is for beginners and it's just a lot easier to teach students how to do the techniques out of this stance first before having them do it with the arrow step and have to worry about the extra coordination and timing. So we're gonna start like this. You're gonna close the fists just like you did in the previous exercise. Your partner for now, and we're gonna keep it super simple. If you're right-handed, your attacker is gonna hold a right arm out here, which is implying a punch. I'm not going to fully lock it out, full power in front of his face. I just hold it here like it's a punch that's on its way over there, right? We're gonna do it diagonally. Again, diagonally means right to right, left to left, and I'm gonna park my arm on the outside. Not here on the inside. This is a different technique. We do that in a different lesson. We're gonna start this way here. And all the Wing Chun trainee is gonna do is step in with that wedge, aiming towards my head. If I don't trust my partner's control, which you may or may not, I don't know who your partner is, you can hold your hands here for safety. So I hold my arm up here and my partner comes in. This is what we call the human wooden dummy protocol. So you're just gonna get this timing down using the step and the punch together. As this starts to be more comfortable, you're gonna step in and wedge and then do a couple light chain punches on the hand like that and then back. And you're gonna repeat this. How many times? Totally up to you. You have to make sure that you can do it well. The timing of the step and the punch is coming in together, that you're wedging beautifully over your partner's punching arm. When that becomes easy, we can integrate a couple other little things. He steps in with the wedge. When he has a couple chain punches, I move away and he's going to advance and follow me with chain punches. So if we move back a little bit, I hold here, he comes in, boom, 1, 2, 3, I step in, he stays on top, not giving me any space. This is a very important Wing Chun idea. Once you step in, if you haven't knocked them out with that first punch, you need to stay on top of them and not give them any space. This is one of the basic tenets of Wing Chun. When that becomes easy, we can start to do it against a live punch, but there it's done progressively. I'm not gonna come at him full power when he just learned the technique. I come with a nice, simple, basic punch, and now he's gonna meet me halfway. As I come to him, he comes to me and does the wedge and defends himself using this. I come in, boom, chain punch. If I start to move away, he's just gonna follow me with chain punches. So this is how we eventually lead up to a live technique. Now the beautiful thing is that the wedge works well on either side. It's not the best for swings. We're gonna handle that momentarily. But the wedge, because both hands are coming forward, it doesn't just protect you against the outside side, it also protects you on the inside side. So you can do a simple exercise like this with your partner. You send a hand forward, they wedge, and I can do the other hand back here. This way, this way, this way, this way, and his reaction is the same. That way when someone's standing in front of you, you don't have to think, right arm, left arm, is it this, is it that? You just send the hand forward and you create a wedge. So we have this basic, simple exercise here you can do as well. So with your partner, I want you to go through the solo progressions, go through the human wooden dummy protocol, build it up to a live punch, and then do this simple wedge exercise at the end where you go inside and outside so you start to feel comfortable with that technique. Okay, so now we just finished the practical portion. It's very important for me that you understand this. The wedge, which we just went over as a solo exercise, as a partner exercise, this is gonna come back to haunt you. Most of Wing Chun is based on a couple fundamental principles. One of the first principles is that we send our hands forward. It's very important because a lot of Wing Chun people think that defending punches is a matter of collecting a bunch of combinations, and this isn't it. What we want to do is we want to learn to defend ourselves in a principle-based way. Sending your hands forward is the foundation of how Wing Chun operates in defense. So it's very important that you don't view the wedge as like, oh, that's just lesson 1 in the basic prep course. The wedge is one of the most fundamental things you could possibly learn in the entire course, and I recommend you practice it again and again. It will come back to haunt you, especially as you continue your Wing Chun training. So now we're going to go on to the basics and concepts portion of the class. As I explained before, this portion of the class is also practical, but what we're going to do is we're going to use practical exercises to highlight the theoretical ideas behind Wing Chun. So one of the main ideas in lesson 1 today is the idea of using a straight line over a curved line. This is how Wing Chun is often explained and differentiated against the other martial arts styles. Wing Chun has a very famous saying which says, "Others walk the bow, we walk the string." All right, and the idea is that while other styles use round movements and curved movements, Wing Chun uses a straight line. Now it's important before I go on, while that is a very common way Wing Chun is explained, it's not entirely true. The idea that Wing Chun only uses a straight line is actually fallacious. We also use curves, we also use angles, we also have round attacks in Wing Chun as well, but we are most famous for this direct line attack and direct line defense. So for the purposes of the prep course, we're going to focus on that, using a straight line. Now, the wedge that we learn is very much the epitome of that. Someone punches you, you send your hands forward and create a straight line. What we're going to do now is we're going to do it with a slightly more complicated or more involved technique. We're going to use the high Tan Sao punch. Okay, so now we're going to practice this. So you're going to face the front here. We're going to start in the traditional Bai Chong. We're going to use the high Tan Sao. The high Tan Sao comes from set 6 of the form, which we will do in lesson 6. In the meantime, we'll just catch the high Tan Sao details here. The high Tan Sao goes palm up. It's in the same line as your shoulder. And at the same time, you're going to punch in the center here. So this Tan Sao is in the shoulder line, about the same height as your ear. And the punch is here right in the center. So you're going to reset back to the middle here. And then you're going to practice the high Tan Sao punch and then come back. So very important when you do the high Tan Sao punch, not only is the Tan Sao high, the elbow is in slightly further than the wrist and the punch is in the center. So you're going to go back, hold this for a moment, and then reset. Go ahead and practice that a few times and get that coordination down. Now let's look at it from a side view. What you'll notice is that the hand doesn't retract into Tan Sao, it goes forward. So he goes Tan Sao punch this way here, and then back. So this Tan Sao is not retreating, this Tan Sao is going forward. High Tan Sao punch and back, high Tan Sao punch and back. Okay, so go ahead and practice that one on your own. Start with at least 10 repetitions on the right side, then go ahead and switch wrist over wrist, 10 repetitions on the right side, and then continue repeating that until you feel a little bit more coordinated with the high Tan Sao punch, and then we'll move to the practical portion of this segment. Okay, so now we're going to put the high Tan Sao in practice. Now we use the high Tan Sao quite simply against a swing. Very important you understand there's a difference between a hook. A hook is a tight, relatively close range punch, and a swing, which is a little wider. Martial artists are very quick to point out how dopey and stupid a swing is, and they're totally correct. A swing is a very foolish punch to do because the landing surface often ends up being the side of your hand. However, it's one of the most common punches in a street fighting situation. So we can say a swing isn't as smart or as nuanced as a hook, but at the same time, a swing is so common on the street, we have to teach our students to defend against it. So we start, especially in the prep class, teaching against basic swings. Later in more advanced Wing Chun, we focus on tight hooks and all sorts of more complicated and advanced punches. So we're gonna start with the same protocol we started with the wedge, which is the human wooden dummy. All right, so you're going to start right leg forward. Your partner is going to hold the swing out. Now, the swing is going to be about halfway there because we're going to imagine you have intercepted your partner's swing. Your high Tan Sao is going to go right into the pit of the elbow in here, and you're going to step in and punch this way here like this, attacking, almost imagining that you are attacking with the Tan Sao rather than defending. So when your partner holds their swing out like this, so you start this way here, and I step in, I'm not placing my Tan Sao here and punching lightly on the chest. When I step forward, I'm attacking this way. Punch is done with control, but the Tan Sao has to be done this way. You want to almost imagine the paradigm of throwing your arm. If someone gives you a swing and you try to use brute force to stop it, it's very understandable why this is going to go over and knock you down. But as the swing comes, if you throw this one, all right, almost as if you're trying to throw your hand off your arm, this way here, you create a structure that allows you to momentarily stop that swing. And of course, at the same time, you're using the straight line concept to punch. So that that swing comes in and you have Tan Sao punch this way here, the high Tan Sao. For now, we're gonna start again using the human wooden dummy protocol. So you start right leg forward. All right, I'm gonna hold my hand here and he's gonna step in and punch this way here and then back. Focusing on attacking the pit of the elbow and using the straight line concept. Go ahead and practice that exercise first. I'd say get at least 20, 30 reps of that so you feel comfortable, and then you can slowly start to do it against a live punch. So as I come in here, he steps in and he's going to stuff my swing with the high Tan Sao punch. And this way here, boom. And this is the first exercise to get the idea of using the straight line to defend the curved line. Go ahead and practice this with your partner, and don't forget to revisit all of these exercises even after you progress into the other lessons. Okay, and now we come to the portion of the class where you have to do the workout. You have to sweat. You can't just do simple basic techniques. We got to put in a little bit of time. So what I want you to do is I want you to grab a timer, either on your phone or a clock on the wall or whatever, and I want you to start with a minute of non-stop steps and punches. Now, we've been doing steps and punches in today's lesson with the wedge and with the follow-up punches. We're going to go more into the detail of the steps, keeping the weight back. You're going to step and punch in a very simple way. Again, we'll go over these details in lesson 2, 3, and beyond. But I want you to practice the chain punching from the warm-up with the advancing step that we were doing today. And I want you to do it non-stop for 1 minute. When you get to the end of the wall or you're about to run into something, I want you to turn, shifting 1 foot at a time, and then continue moving and just go around back and forth. But don't stop for the entire minute. Don't go full power and full speed right away. You're going to get really tired. Try to pace yourself so you last for the entire minute. As your skills get better, you can push your intensity during that minute, but I want you to always last a minute even the first time you try it. So go ahead and do that, and then we're going to move over to the cool down. Okay, so now on to the hip 6. So we're going to start facing to the right side, back leg straight, and we're going to hold this for about 5 to 10 seconds. While you're doing this, as you see, you can put your hands on your thighs, focus on the hips. It's a lot more about the hips than the hamstrings. Now from here, you're going to shift your weight onto the back leg. You want your front foot pointing straight up to the sky, and you're going to hold it there as much as possible. You want the rear foot planted on the floor. I'm going to hold that for a little bit. And now, keeping your head nice and low, you're going to shift to the other side. This time your front foot is flat on the floor. And again, this is all for tempering the hips, for everything we need in Wing Chun: kicks, sweeps, counter sweeps, leg defenses, all sorts of things. And now, we go back to the first exercise, except this time to the other side. So hands there on the thigh, try to straighten the back leg, posture straight, and we hold it there. And now we're going to shift onto the back leg, this time with the toe up. So we basically do everything in reverse. Holding it there. Again, opening up the hips as much as possible. And now from here, we shift to the other side. And this time the front foot is flat on the floor. So doing it one time with the toe up, one time with the toe down, just puts a slight different variation on the hip angle, which allows us to get more benefit out of the stretch. And now feet parallel, like you're in a low horse stance, elbows on the inside of your knees, hands together, post the arms out. And we're going to just chill here for a moment. You can even rock a little bit side to side, open the hips up a little bit. And now you're going to put your hands on the floor, straighten your legs, and try to relax your head. You can even shake your head side to side to make sure that you're really not holding your neck. Now you go ahead and grab the right ankle. And grab the left ankle. And now you grab both, pull yourself in. And now as you come up, you're going to come up vertebrae by vertebrae nice and slowly. When you get all the way to the top, you're just going to do a little back bend to neutralize it. And we're done with the hip 6. Okay, so that's the end of lesson 1. So just as with all of these lessons, you don't have to do them as quickly as we do it in the presentation. You can pause the videos, go ahead and practice them, review the material. At the end of every lesson, we also have a printout of everything that was covered in that lesson. So for those of you who like to have a readout of what you've done, we have also provided that for you as well. Go back through the video series, go back through the explanations. Lesson 1 is perhaps one of the most important, if not the most important lesson in your Wing Chun career, because it is your first lesson. Everything we did today is not just for learning basics, but this is for setting the foundation for Wing Chun. The wrist grab defense taught you about the simplicity of Wing Chun. You learned the first set. You learn the basic crab step, which gives you the knee pressure, which is the foundation for all of Wing Chun footwork. Then on top of that, you learn the wedge, which is the epitome of using very simple actions to defend an aggressive attack. Then we had simultaneous offense and defense with the Taan punch, focusing on using the straight line versus the curved line. Everything you did in today's lesson is very much straight to the heart of what all Wing Chun practitioners need to understand. Feel free to take as much time as you want when you go through these lessons. Don't feel that you need to rush it or immediately go to lesson 2. This is a video series. You can watch these as much as you'd like, review it as much as you like, and when you feel comfortable, you can go ahead and move on to lesson 2.